The ancient Jewish prophets often referred to their prophecies as a masa, a burden. Lo navi anochi v'lo ben navi anochi. I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet. Nonetheless, I understand the burden. Here I am speaking on the internet. People think that everything is easily comprehensible. People tell me, make your writings shorter, make your videos shorter. See if you can see if you can fit everything into a minute. Really? I am not that easily understood. If that sounds arrogant, I'm okay with that. I don't care. This is more important to understand. I'd rather somebody say, hey, he's arrogant. Arr! I'd rather some egoist, which is nearly everybody watching nearly everything on the internet. Let me see how I can judge this. Good. Good. Let them know who they are from this point onwards. That's who they are. I'm speaking to people who are wise and curious, people who don't feel they have something that is threatened, people who want truth, people who realize that if I'm wrong, that's okay. They can ignore it. If I say something that doesn't fit logic, if I say something that doesn't back up with truth, then first of all, the good-heartedness, the humility is necessary to recognize with all people in the world at all times, but definitely on the internet, assume goodness, assume you didn't necessarily understand that person. That's it. That's how I do it, usually, ideally. And if you think that you did understand me, or even if you didn't, but if I'm wrong, if I'm logically wrong, regardless of whether you understood me correctly or the words that you think are logically wrong are just simply how you heard them, as long as you recognize, hey, he's wrong, good, no problem at all. You can let it go. Don't be afraid. There's nothing you have to fight. I don't let most comments through. You have no clue the level of depravity and stupidity of the comments that I receive, many by people who didn't watch the complete videos. So for every single thing that I have written or said, if you don't watch the complete video, I'm referring to videos like this, not 30-second bits. If you don't watch the complete video, please assume you didn't understand it. That said, today is Christmas. And Christmas, the way that I view it in real time, in the world as it is a very nice day. I must have wished Merry Christmas to dozens of individuals today. I even gave somebody a Christmas gift. It's fine. Nobody cares about the reason for the season. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. Now I'd like to address the reason for the season. Last night, I attempted to make a video. Last night, Christmas Eve. I attempted to make a video because it's quite interesting that Jews have this strange holiday of sorts, or counter-holiday, anti-holiday, called Nitzelnacht. Christmas Eve, where many Orthodox Jewish communities, people who dress like this, don't study Torah. They don't study divine wisdom that night. And I would get into a lot of details. I attempted to make a video yesterday. There's a few attempts. None of them got very far because they didn't feel 100% authentic. So you can imagine, for the record, as I mentioned earlier, how difficult it is, how painful it is to really care to be as authentic as I can be, and yet to be regarded as just some dude spouting stuff on even close friends. And when I say friends, I mean people who I care about, not people who are intellectually understanding me at all, obviously. But close friends are like, you jump from one thing to another, I didn't really get what you were doing. I'm speaking to you. That's what I'm doing. I'm speaking to you. So I attempted to make that video yesterday. It was going to be funny. I was going to do a Wie wünsch you Amerikatzmach, wie wünsch you Amerikatzmach, wie wünsch you Amerik. And I was going to explain Nitzelnacht, where it comes from, probably from the Latin word natal, as in birth. But Jews like to think that it had to do with the word natal, hanged, the hanged one. Some of them would read some ancient book called Toldos Yeshu, the chronology of Jesus, which is very insulting, and which most people today wouldn't care about. But the truth is, a large segment of the people that I'm speaking to right now are Christians. The people I'm speaking to right now are a mixed group of people. I don't know who will watch this. But I have met very many sincere, good Christians, good, solid people. And I hope that they are listening. Many of them haven't thought very deeply. Some have. Many of them have not, and therefore a lot of this will be over their heads. They haven't considered it. Not that they're unintelligent, but they haven't considered anything beyond similitudes. But they tend to have a humbler heart than most, and that is more important to understanding than anything else. In any case, after spending truly a whole night attempting to make this video, I was exhausted and said that for the rest of the day, at least until 10:59, I have my reasons. Nothing mystical. I have my reasons. I wouldn't record or write anything. I would be free from the masa, free from the burden. Good. Well, I woke up, interestingly. You might not be that interested to hear my sleeping and waking habits, but to me they're interesting. You might find them interesting too. I'm not the kind of person who has easily fallen asleep and woken up. Inertia has been my way. An object at rest remains at rest, an object awake remains awake. And especially if I do wake up easily, it's usually because the windows are open and the sun comes in, or the light's on, or I've been asleep for a while, or there's some light noise in the background, stuff like that. And my dreams are more closely related to my sentiments during consciousness. But sometimes, if an alarm goes off, you can be deep, deep, deep in the kind of dream that's its own world, the kind of dream that doesn't know at all that it's a dream, the kind of dream that takes itself really seriously, thinks it's its own world, and you wake up not knowing who you are, where you are for a few seconds till you get your bearing. That happened today, except that there was no alarm, because I had stayed up all night, and I had only slept a brief few hours, and there was no alarm, and I woke up completely awake. But for a few seconds, totally unaware of who I was or where I was. The first thought, of course, that came to me was to go back to the deep dream, even if it wasn't putting me to sleep. What was that? Because I was deep on that. And the only part that I recollected, and still recollect, was that it was Christmas. Which, to most Jews in America, even Jews who don't dress like this, Christmas is simply a day when all the goyim disappear. There's no one out in the streets. The non-religious Jews make a joke that Christmas is for eating Chinese food, because the Chinese and the Jews are the only people who are out and about on Christmas. So that was my dream. My dream was the streets were empty, like during COVID times, when I was out and about. But we can set that aside. It's a whole different subject. If that annoys you, I apologize that it annoys you, but trust me, I have my reasons. Very good reasons, solid reasons. And there were just a few people out, and that was it. And when I woke up, when I got my bearings, I realized today actually is Christmas. And it was kind of shocking. Now, it shouldn't surprise you. I'm not claiming that this dream is anything other than the fact that, of course, on some level, I did know it was Christmas. Nonetheless, that was my thought, and I was like, that's very weird. It doesn't usually work that way. If my dream is like a whole different universe, it doesn't have any bearing, and no emotional connection to the world that I'm in, it doesn't really have any bearing on, there's no connection. It's not real. There's nothing there. In any case, so today, deciding that I had nothing in particular that I had to do, I stepped into the next room, and I saw this. It's Hebrew. It says Torah, Nevi'im, Uchtuvim. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, the prophets, that's from Joshua through the minor 12 prophets, Uchtuvim, and the writings, which include Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Job, and a whole bunch of other writings. This is the Jewish Bible. And this, I believe, belonged to my great-grandparents who lived in this house. And it has a Yiddish translation. In any case, I came there and I was free from any concerns, which is the right kind of time to be able to receive any perception. I'm not claiming that I necessarily did or didn't, but it is the right way when you're not otherwise engrossed. You can ask anybody who does meditation from the Eastern schools, etc. This is how it works. Anyways, so I decide I'm going to open up, without looking even at what book it is, just point to a spot and start reading. And this is what I read. And it relates to Christmas. Literally, my finger landed right there on the beginning of this verse over here. Shimu es hadovar. Hear this word. For those people who don't know, well, I assume I'm speaking to people who would know. Christians will often point to different verses and say this indicates this and this indicates that relating to Jesus. All of us do that. I'm about to do it right now. But I'm not claiming that it necessarily relates. I'm just sharing with you what happened. That's it. I'm just sharing with you what happened and the verse. That's it. But I've never heard this one. This no Christian has pointed to me before. Shimu es hadovar. Hear this word. And this is from the book of Jeremiah. Asher diber Yehovah aleichem. That God said to you, Beis Yisrael, house of Israel. Ko, Omar Yehovah. Thus says God. El derech hagoyim al talamdu. Do not learn the ways, the customs of the goyim. Goyim means nations. In other words, all the nations that are not the people who have this. El derech hagoyim al talamdu. From the ways of the goyim do not learn. Umei oisais hashamayim al techeto. And from the signs of the heavens do not be afraid. Some of you might be familiar with the fact that the reason Christianity is the religion of the world, a large part of the world, and has influenced all of the world, is because some not so great individual named Constantine claimed that he saw a sign in the heavens. In hac signo vinces, with this sign thee shalt conquer. The book of Jeremiah is written approximately 580 before the Common Era. As a matter of fact, the person who wrote these words, the person who actually was the scribe for Jeremiah, his name was Baruch ben Neriah. Baruch means blessing, the son of the light of God. That's just what his name is. And we actually have archaeological evidence from Baruch ben Neriah himself. This is like historical stuff. I say like historical stuff because we don't have the original document that he wrote. We only have documents that are 21 or 2200 years old, but not going back all 2580. So, being a skeptic, I'll say like, but it's there's nothing else like this. Don't be fearful of the signs in the heaven just because the goyim are fearful of them. The statutes, the practices, the beliefs, the customs, the ways of the nations are hevel, are nothing. Hevel, habal, the without. Puff, nothing, empty. Ki eitz mi'ar karaso, because his cross is wood from a tree. Cross, of course, is an English word. I understand English, and I'm the one who just read the verse. I'm the one who today woke up and literally within 2 minutes of this dream and of realizing it was Christmas, opened this book. The word karaso literally means cut down. It's wood cut down from a tree. But if you think, and I'm not saying this is so or not so, if you think that there could be something to understand here that perhaps Jeremiah himself, as he wrote it, didn't understand, but that he was speaking with some level of divinity, well, the guy who read this, who's reading it to you now, he read it as cross. That's what it says to me. If you want to read it as cut down, it's not much better. Ki eitz mi'ar karaso, his cross is wood from a tree. Ma'aseh yedei charash b'matzod. It's something a craftsman created with an axe. B'chesef u'v'zov hiyapehu. With silver and gold he makes it beautiful. B'masmaros u'v'mokavos yechazkum v'lo yafik. With nails and hammers that is strengthened so it doesn't fall. Let me read that again. Ki chukos ha'amim hevelhu, because the practices of the nations are nothing. Ki eitz mi'ar kuraso, his cross is wood from a tree. Ma'aseh yedei charash b'matzad, the work of a craftsman with an axe. B'chesef u'v'zov yapehu, though he makes it beautiful with silver and gold. In reality, b'masmaros u'v'makavos yechazkum v'lo yafik. It doesn't fall because of the hammer and nails by which that God is strengthened. God with a lowercase g, that false God. Now, because I believe in context, And I want to get to the point where Jeremiah defines the literal God. And over here, from this verse where he's going to define the literal God, his God, that is the verse that Maimonides uses to define God in the beginning of his magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah, the review of the Torah, or secondary to the Torah. His book that at every given moment, at this very moment, there are at least a dozen people reading from his book and discussing his book at this very second. I say at least a dozen because the reality is there's probably hundreds of people at this very second. And in certain seconds, there are probably thousands or tens of thousands. That's Maimonides, Rambam. For those who care what he had to say, he, like everybody, including down to the Hasidic rabbis and the Muslim, everybody, is concerned about the fact that God is one, and yet God has a whole bunch of names and God's described this way and that way. How do you get to that? How do you understand God being one? The way he does it is with this verse coming up. I'm going to read from the beginning again. And if it's too much for you, then this video is not for you, and nothing I say is for you. I apologize. I don't apologize. It's not for you. It's for people for whom it is for. And they want me to read the whole thing. Shimu es hadover asher diber Yehovah aleichem beis Yisrael. Hear this matter that Yehovah has said to you, house of Israel. Ko omar Yehovah, so says Yehovah. El derech hagoyim al talamdu. To the paths of the Gentiles do not learn. Umei osos hashemayim al teichotu ki yechotu hagoyim mehema. And from the signs of the heavens, do not be afraid because the goyim are afraid of them. Ki chukos am hevelhu. The statutes. How do you define chukos in this context? It's the whole kit and caboodle. It's the whole thing. People take, for example, law seriously, American law, or the practices or beliefs or whatever social media that day decides is right and wrong. Hevel, nothing, nothing. Habal, though without, nothing. Ki chukos ha'amim hevelhu. Ki eitz mi'ar kuraso. It is cut down, this cross, say both definitions, as wood from a tree. Ma'aseh de choresh b'matzad, the work of a craftsman with an axe. The chesef u'bezov yapehu, though it is made beautiful with silver and gold. B'masmeros u'v'makovos yichazkum. In fact, it is only strengthened by the nails and the hammers, v'lo yafik, so that it does not fall. That's both literal and it is spiritual. Everybody knows. Christians don't like to believe that they're worshiping an idol. They worship the guy, the hammer and nail guy. That's yechazkum. That's what strengthens it. V'lo yafik, so it doesn't fall in their conceptions. And please understand, I am not attempting to take away any of the correct and good parts of Christianity or any parts of anything whatsoever. I'm sharing something here. But God forbid that somebody should think, someone who is Christian should think, that this is like magical stuff. Yes, you might have been magicked into your belief, and therefore you can be magicked out of it. But if you are magicked into a good belief and it's working for you, and it's good, then be careful what you get rid of. Only get rid of, don't be afraid. You'll see in a moment how God is defined. Don't be afraid. Seek the truth, and that's it. Kisomer mikshahem v'lo yadabru. Like a mute scarecrow. Naso yunaso kilo yitzadu. It can't march by itself, so it's carried. I have seen this numerous times when I lived in Spain for 3 years. The cross and the various idols and all of that carried. It can't go on its own. Al tiru mehem, don't be afraid of them. Ki lo yiro. They can't do you harm. V'gam heitev enosam. They also don't do you any good. But me'ein kamocha Yehovah. There is nothing like you, God. Gadol ata. You are the greatness. V'gadol shimcha begvura. And your name is great in strength. Mi lo yira'acha melech hagoyim. Ki l'cha ya'asar. Who shouldn't fear you, King of all the nations? For you it is proper. Ki v'chol chachmei hagoyim. Because among all the wise people of the nations, uvechol malchusam, and in all their kingdoms, me'ein kamocha, there is none like you. As for the idols, uva'achas yivaru v'yichaslu. In a single second, it's burned and shown to be silly. As in contrast, the all-encompassing God, which is ineffable, which doesn't have any physical form, which shouldn't be relegated to any physical form. Musar havolim etzu. All their morals are emptiness. They're based on a tree. Kesef meruka me tarshish, yuva vezahav me upaz. They bring their silver from Tarshish, their gold from Upaz, maaseh chorash v'yedei tzoref, and they are simply made. He's trying to show you where the idol comes from, so you're not venerating it. They are made by a craftsman and at the hands of a silversmith. Tcheles v'argomon levusham, maaseh chacham kulam. Even if they are, their tcheles v'argomon, their blue, back in those days, various dyes were expensive. If you know American history or English history or Indian history especially, dye, or Phoenician history, dyes to make colors were often very, very expensive. So tcheles v'argomon levusham, perhaps a special dye of blue or purple is their garments. We still use the word purple for royal, wearing the purple, because purple was very expensive. Ma'aseh chacham kulam, they're just the work of wise human beings. V'Yehovah Elohim emes. But emes, truth, ultimate reality, that which actually is Yehovah, the God, the power, the decider, the ruler. Hu Elohim Chayim, he is the living ruler, the living God, Umelech Olam, and the King of eternity. The ancient Jews from that time would pray for a messianic era when Yahuwah Echad Ushemo Echad, when God is one and his name is one. What does that even mean? Shema Yisrael. And I know that I'm saying this word and I'll explain why. Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu Yahuwah Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our ruler and God is one. He's one. What do you mean that in the end of days he'll be one, his name will be one? And the answer is that even though early on in the Ten Commandments, it says not to take the Lord's name in vain, which also means don't just bandy it about. Although I would say that there's certainly nothing wrong with reading it within the verse if your intentions are good. But in general, be careful with it. I don't think it really applies today. I really don't. Not because it doesn't apply as its essence, but because it's become a joke. In the future, he'll be one, his name is one. He's already just all that there is God. There's nothing outside of God, nothing beyond God, nothing beyond ultimate reality, nothing beyond ultimate truth. Truth is truth. What is. God is the is. That's what the name Yud He Vav He, which I've been saying, means. The past, the present, the future. It comes from Moses. When Moses spoke to God, and Moses said, hey, what's your name? And God said, what do you mean, what's my name? Eya Asher Eya. I'll be what I'll be. I is what I is. I am what I am. So when Moses referred to him, he did I am into the he. He is I am, and therefore you get Yud He Vav He. But today, when people speak of God, it's meaningless what word they use. God, Hashem, which means the name, or Elohim, or in any language, it's meaningless. 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people have different understandings of what they're talking about when they say it. If you want the name, the name of God, which we don't really know properly how to pronounce, which is part of my excuse. But if you want that name of God to be one, there has to be an understanding. When the whole world would be filled with the knowledge of God like water covers the oceans. Water, the oceans is water. In other words, it's complete, it's total, the understanding. And then when people know truth and reality, when they worship truth and reality, then God's name is one. Then it means something. So, Toldos Yeshu. It is supposedly his birthday. Let's speak a little bit about Jesus. First of all, his name wasn't Jesus. In fact, in the ancient languages that he spoke, it's unlikely that there was any J sound. If you called him Jesus, he would have no idea what you're talking about. His name was Yehoshua, Joshua. Yehoshua means God will save. That was his name. You might think that itself is some kind of inclination, but you should know that Yehoshua was a common name. Obviously, it's the first leader to take over from Moses, And until this very day, it is still a common name all over the world and among Jews as well. Secondly, we don't have very many records regarding the Jews of that era. Nonetheless, despite not having that many records, we have records of other Yehoshuas who were also crucified because people thought, or they claimed, that they were the kings of the Jews. Why was there a messianic fervor in those days? Well, there's always a messianic fervor. B'machshavat chila, the name of the Messiah, the idea of the Messiah, is built in to the Bible. It's built in to the creation of the world. It's the perfection that we're aiming towards. We don't expect right now to get to any kind of utopia, but we do hope to get as close as we can. And we do believe that the forces of the world, whether you call them Yud K Vav K, which is the ineffable name that I've been effing, well, or whether you call it the Tao, T-A-O. The Tao, it's the all, everything there is. Whatever you call it. That is on our team as we view it. And as the Taoists all the way deep in China viewed it too. And if you flow with it the right way, then we'll get closer and closer and better to all the good stuff. So, Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet, the most mysterious of the prophets, because he supposedly went up to heaven in a fiery chariot, whatever this means. And he is supposedly going to come back before the time of the Messiah, which Maimonides, the greatest of our scholars, Maimonides says that we don't know if it's going to be a physical Elijah, like coming down from the heavens, or if it's going to be somebody who's going to do the same thing as Elijah. He says we don't know. We'll find out when it happens. But we have a tradition from Elijah. It's not in the Bible. It's referenced in the Bible. I myself have come across a few things, which there's no point in sharing right now. But we have a tradition that there will be 6,000 years from the beginning of the chronology of Adam. Today is December 25th, according to the Julian Gregorian Christian world calendar. According to the Jewish calendar, today is the 13th or 14th, because the Jewish date starts at night, and therefore, whereas Christmas is from midnight to midnight, the Jewish date will encompass 2 days, because it'll encompass the first day, and then once it gets dark, it's the 14th. So the 13th and the 14th of Tevet. Today is the 14th. Tevet itself is a Babylonian, it's not just Babylonian, it's from the whole area. As a matter of fact, a lot of these, no, we'll get sidetracked. We lost many of the original names, unfortunately. We lost a lot of things in our exile. It is, however, 3,501 years and 10 months minus 1 day from the day that the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. It is also 9 months and 16 days from the final sabbatical Jubilee year. The final year, the final chance we have, it only arises every 50 years. The last one we have, according to this understanding of the prophecy from Elijah that I'll tell you, the tradition from Elijah, the last chance that we have, the last world, a world is 50 years in the biblical understanding. It's an era, it's every 50 years. And the next era is beginning very soon. And before it begins, we have a full year of washing ourselves clean from all the nonsense and dross that all the chukos hagoyim, all the musar that's hevel, all the ways of the world that are nonsense, all the vomit that we've accrued over the years, all the ideas and beliefs. We need a year of So this teaching from Elijah says that there will be 2,000 years from Adam, and I do not know if Adam was a literal person. There were definitely people around before Adam, so I do not know if there was a literal Adam or if Adam is a metaphor. Adam, the whole thing works very well as a metaphor, actually as a couple of different metaphors, possibly written with different intents, possibly even coming from different sources. The question of what the Bible, and none of this should be disturbing to people who believe that the Bible is the exact word of God, because trust me, there are very, very good sources, at least among the Jewish sources with which I'm very familiar, that are very much backing me up on this. This is not complicated stuff. Only for simpletons who don't know anything or know very, very little and shouldn't be watching this, because they'll be afraid and everything they believe will be shattered, or they'll hate this, one or the other. Nonetheless, from Adam, and by the way, just so you understand, the Bible itself doesn't claim that Adam was literally... no, I won't get sidetracked. From Adam, there's supposed to be 2,000 years of tohu, 2,000 years of civilization. Adam represents, at the very least, the beginning of civilization. What we might term the beginning of recorded history. As a matter of fact, it's where writing begins. It's actually where we have history begin, literally. 2,000 years of people just trying to figure stuff out. So, for example, Hammurabi's Code, which I myself saw with my own eyes, Hammurabi's Code, and also Hittite laws, which I saw with my own eyes as well, dating from this period, say things like, if a craftsman builds a house and the roof caves in and kills a girl, then you have to kill the daughter of the guy who built the house. Now, you and I, with a lot of law behind us, a lot of understanding and seeing different things, we can definitely come up with a better solution than that. They were working it out. They were trying to figure it out. So this teaching says 2,000 years of tohu, followed by 2,000 years of Torah, of instruction, beginning with Abraham, of understanding and teaching things, Torah. Then 2,000 years of Mashiach, 2,000 years of Messiah. And so, those 2,000 years of Messiah, I won't address right now that the Jewish calendar is missing 165 years. I can explain very clearly and rather indisputably what the story is. Anybody of honest understanding will agree with it, I think. I won't address it. The 4,000 year point, therefore, when the Messiah is supposed to come, and people are supposed to be at a higher level of needing instruction, when it's clear, when they understand on their deep level what truth is. Kemayim mechasim layam, like water covers the sea. When the Messiah comes, then we won't have to follow literally the words in the book because it'll be second nature. It'll be first nature to us. It'll be obvious. But there won't be that level of misunderstanding of having to follow something which we don't get. Well, as the years of the Messiah were coming, lots of people named their kids Yehoshua. And lots of people were trying to bring the Messiah. Most people, because this is how people operate, most people were doing it by thinking they should fight the Romans. Really, the Romans who were in charge of Israel at that time, in charge of most of the civilized world at that time. That's how they figured the Messiah was going to come. Fight and get rid of the Romans. Didn't go. Other people, they went off into the desert and practiced an ascetic lifestyle. Yet other people went down to Egypt and made their own temple in Egypt. And then this fellow, Yehoshua, from Nazareth, his idea was different. But before we get to him, you should know, by the way, that the actual year 4000 was the year 75. The year 75 was the year that the Temple of Peace was consecrated. The Temple of Peace, which housed the Jewish menorah and all the vessels from the Second Temple that survived, were housed in this, at the time, the grandest temple on the face of the earth. That's what actually happened. As the rabbis phrase it, Mipnei avonoseinu sherabu, because our sins increased, yatsu mashiyatsu. What happened, happened. The Messiah did not come as he was supposed to. So back to Yehoshua Minatzeret. So I think that Jeremiah has already done away with much of what Christianity has been over the last 2,000 years. Not referring to Yeshua himself, referring to what it's been. As for how Jews have related to it, there are many Christians to this very day, but certainly throughout history, but even to this very day, nice people whom I know, who really believe, as there are many Muslims who believe from their perspective regarding the Quran, but let's discuss the Christian aspect, who truly believe that Jews believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but they reject him because they're evil. They're in league with the devil. Really good people, because people open up to me after I demanded it, even very polite people. I'll tell you a funny little story here. So I have had encounters with lots of reclusive communities and individuals who don't really engage, certainly not on a deep, true, real level with other people on the outside. I would love to tell you the whole story about this particular Amish guy, how I came to meet this older guy, and I would love to tell you, and how he brought me a box of guns. I don't have the guns, but I'll just get to this point. after we know each other for a few hours, I said, listen, tell me what what you really think about Jews. What do you, and he's not, you didn't want, you're fine, good people, God, all the, and this is not the Amish kind of Amish guy who talks to outsiders. This is not Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is not the Chabad of the Amish. Chabad is the ultra-Orthodox Jews who know how to talk to other Jews, other people who are not Chabad, whereas some other Hasidim don't necessarily know how to talk to outsiders. These are real Amish guys. And finally, he said, "You can't speak." They have a weird accent. They speak a different language, but in English. So I said, "What?" He said, "You can't spit." And I was sure I didn't understand what he was talking about. I was sure he was saying something metaphysical. He wasn't. I said, "Show me what." He says, "Spit." I said, "What? You want me to spit right now? I don't get. You want me to spit?" He says, "You can't do it." I said, "Show me what you mean." I wasn't going to do it. This is an older man. He runs a library. He's a scholar. He's really, I met him through meeting his granddaughter at a tattoo parlor. I don't have any tattoos. Like I said, I seek out interesting people. So he spat. Because he really believes what he'd been taught, that Jews are a magnet for the world's spittle. And Jews cannot, therefore, expectorate. So, being as I'm somewhat sensitive, I said, I can't, just so you know, I can spit, but I'd rather not show you if it's going to damage your, are you sure about this? How? And he explained, yes, he's as sure as this as he is of anything else in the faith. It's something fundamental. It's one of the things he learned as a child and never had reason to question. So I really didn't want to do it. After a few minutes, of him getting more cocky about my inability to do it. At that point, I guess he deserved it. So I didn't spit on him, but I spat further than he did. He didn't say anything for like 2 minutes. It really shook him. He's a very nice guy. So yeah, a lot of Christians really do believe some crazy ass things. It's not true. Let me tell you about the Jews. If they're wrong about anything about Jesus, they don't know they're wrong. It's that simple. As for how Jews relate to Jesus, I'm using the word Jesus on purpose now, because I'm referring to not the guy who lived way back when. I'm referring to the guy the Jews know because of all the difficulties they've had under people who have shouted his name in their faces and forced them to convert and held the cross and the sword. They hate the guy. Their stories that they'll tell on Nittelnacht are scatological about the fella. I have seen myself, by the way, in Barcelona, in a museum, where they meant to use at one point, really engraved on the wall, they meant to use the word eschatological, which means like messianic related, and instead use scatological, which means feces related. Well, if you don't know the word scatological, I should translate feces as well. Shit related. That's scatological. So yeah, they hated the guy. But they weren't breaking into churches to steal the host and torture it. Anybody who doesn't have a reason to believe that, it's ridiculous. Transubstantiation is just so plain. Anyone who does believe it today recognizes that if they didn't have some solid reason for believing it, everyone else would recognize it's ridiculous, it's stupid. There's no reason to think they would do that. It's just so darn dumb. So that's who most Jews know. They know Jesus. They know a name they can't stand to hear, makes them feel like vomiting, gets them angry because of the history. Let's talk about the man, Yeshua. First of all, it's worth noting that, of course, with anything ancient, even anything going on today, we don't necessarily know. There are various versions of different stuff regarding Yeshua in the Christian Bible itself, referred to by Christians as the New Testament. There's various details that are different and sometimes contradictory. Here's my view from a lifetime of study, thought, conversation, and honest reflection on the matter. Like I said, he wanted to be, or thought that wanted makes it sound like it's an egotistical thing. I don't think it was that. I think he looked around and he realized, my goodness, what a friggin' mess this is. All the Jews fighting and killing each other over some stupid detail or argument. Ridiculous. So he tried to simplify it for everybody. Hillel, a short while earlier, great Rabbi Hillel, someone came to him who was not Jewish, and at that time Jews were accepting converts eagerly. Today, unfortunately, some Jewish groups are accepting converts eagerly, some less eagerly. It's really a mess. You should check out, if you're interested, on my Substack, ydyddy.substack.com. So it's ydyddy.substack.com. substack.com. Click on archive over there after you get in. And there's something on conversion that I wrote about a month ago. A lot of the wrong people are being converted into Judaism. A lot of the right people are not. Well, this fellow came to Hillel and he said, listen, tell me what Judaism is, al regel achas. You have so many books. Tell me what it is, al regel achas, which literally means as long as I can stand on one leg. Tell it to me for as long as I can stand, right? I mean, obviously you can do it for a little bit of a while, but you get the point. Regel also literally means on one post. The 613 commandments is multiple. There's 24 books, depending on how you count, but we consider it 24 books. Then there's multiple stuff outside of these main books. Tell it to me in one stand. And Hillel said, okay. Da'alach sni, this is Aramaic, not Hebrew. Da'alach sni, what's hateful unto you, l'chavrach lo savid. Don't do to your friend. You know, think about the guy, empathize. Think, what don't I like? He's a human, he probably don't like it either. Da'alach sni, what's hateful unto you, l'chavrach lo savid. Don't do to your friend. Zuhi kol haTorah kula ve'idach perushahu. This is the whole entire Torah. This is all the instruction. Everything else is commentary on that. He wasn't joking. That's what law is. That's what law is supposed to be. Well, Jesus saw that that wasn't really inspiring the masses. They were caught up in horrible ritualism that all the prophets spoke against. Isaiah, Amos, Zechariah, they mocked them. Amos has God saying, Amos in Hebrew, has God saying, just, bring your sacrifices, your fat sacrifices, because I know how much you love doing that. Sarcastically. And Isaiah says, Halachofka agmon rosho, v'sakvo efer yatziyah, halazetik ratzon, v'yom ratzon liyahuah. Is it to bend your head like a reed and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? That's what you call a tzom? A tzom is a holy day, a fast day. That's what you call a tzom and a desirable day to God? Zechariah has the people come to him and say, hey, should we continue to fast for the loss of the first temple? Because there was no second temple at that time. Or should we just get on with our lives? And Zechariah said, listen, all the prophets already spoke to you when the first temple still stood. They told you what to do. They told you how to have a good society. They told you how to act. And the people didn't get it. They went to him. He had a beard. He spoke with the old accent. He knew a lot of writing. He was a holy man. And they wanted to hear, check the mezuzahs. They wanted to hear, start wearing, eight kanfas. Start wearing more tzitzis. Start doing all these. They wanted to hear what chumras. They wanted to hear what, tell us we should be fast 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. It seems, by the way, that the fast might have been originally 3 days. Although after the second temple period, it might have been shortened to 1 because it doesn't matter. So Jesus wasn't really saying anything new in that regard. The fact that the religion turned into Jesus, accept the name of the Lord and you'll be saved, accept his grace. And woo! What a fall from grace. Not what the man preached. It appears that Rabbi Akiva, one of our greatest scholars, Rabbi Akiva, it appears very likely, came originally from a family of people who were following the Jesus faith. Now, the Jesus faith, even in its own day, took on a lot of the problems that he himself talked about. Jesus said, you guys in the temple, you guys in your, well, first of all, in your synagogues, you guys in your synagogues, you're making your tefillin, the special things that people wear, that Jews wear on their head, which has certain verses in there to remember about God being one, God took you out of Egypt, certain essentials. You're making your tefillin larger. You're shuckling, you're showing how holy you are. What is this nonsense? He said, of course you have to follow all the rules. He said, for as long as heaven and earth stand, not the edge of a yud, in other words, not the teeniest dot, but the teeniest letter, will be erased. He said that in chapter 5 of the New Testament. It's amazing how Christians are able to fly right past that one, but okay, not all Christians. Some people have good reasons, etc., etc. I'm not mocking. I am mocking a little bit, I have to be honest, because it's likely that a lot of people watching this will be Jewish. And they still have a lot of that fear and hatred and revulsion and the view that because of this fear, hatred, and revulsion, they view it as idolatry, much worse than they'll view Buddhism or Vishnu or whatever else. That's like technically idolatry. But Yoshkes, that really, they don't necessarily always realize where it's coming from, the history that it's coming from. My ancestors have suffered. My grandparents were all in Europe during the Holocaust and had their families slaughtered. My mother's mother was in Auschwitz. My other relatives were also in horrible situations in Europe. Horrible stuff. Families. I had an aunt and uncle who were killed that I didn't even know about until I was older. My grandfather, my mother's father, apparently was married before the war. I am familiar with anti-Semitism. I'm not saying this from a point of distance. Nonetheless, if we're going to be rational, we have to take into account our biases and correct against them. So Jesus said, he took Hillel's principle and he tried to make it positive. Instead of what's hateful unto you, don't do unto others, he said, do unto others as you would want done unto you. But his very wise statements quickly became ridiculous. It's recorded in the rabbinic literature of that time period that they said nobody today is able to receive reprovement. You try to correct somebody on something and they say, hey man, before you try to tell me about the speck in my eye, get the beam out of yours, Rabbi. And when he said that, there was someone there who corrected him. And he said, hey, you know Rabbi Akiva? The Rabbi Akiva? Because if I'm not mistaken, the person who actually said this, nobody can accept improvement because they quote the Jesus thing. Because Jesus was popular. People knew some of his sayings. So, Akiva, before he, and by the way, this rabbi who said, I believe it was Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon started out as a rabbi of Rabbi Akiva and then became a student of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was unbelievable. He was so great, in fact, that he messed up royally in his final estimation of stuff. In supporting the Bar Kokhba revolt, he ended up being murdered in a coliseum in front of thousands of witnesses by having his body raked with combs of steel. Naked, his body raked, old man, raked with combs of steel until dead. And the Bar Kokhba revolt was such a mess for the Jews. It brought such utter destruction that Jews became like sheep to the slaughter. They became that wimpy, oy vey, oy vey, curse upon the Goyim, until the Holocaust. After the Holocaust, they said, no more. Now we get nuclear bomb. Nuclear bomb. But for 2,000 years, or nearly 2,000 years, Bar Kokhba revolt ended in the year 135. For nearly 2,000 years, Jews didn't try to fight back because fighting back worked so badly. Nonetheless, Rabbi Akiva is beloved. And this person said, there's, I believe, two versions of who that person was, because the books are not stupid. The Jews, the people of the book, they record pretty carefully what they have to say. You have to know how to read them, and you have to know where something got in that wasn't recorded by someone great. You have to know these things. You have to understand them. You have to have the correct interest in understanding them. So this person said, this great Rabbi Akiva, back when he was still Akiva ben Yosef, Akiva the son of Joseph, Joseph, who was following that Christian guy, Joseph, who didn't really know anything. Well, a lot of times when he was a kid, we were in the same village, and when he would do something that I thought was wrong, I was the tattletale, and I would go to the rabbi and I would say, hey, Akiva ben Yosef is acting badly. And you have no idea, he says, so many times Akiva ben Yosef got slapped around because of me. And each time he corrected his behavior and loved me more. The word there is love. He loved me more for each time that he was corrected. That's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva decided to modify the Jesus statement that the whole Torah is loving God and love your neighbor. And if you do that, then you'll end up doing everything else too. He wasn't trying to get rid of anything. And he said, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is a great principle of the Torah. But if you would say it's the principle of the Torah, then people would be like they are today, able to be rotten. How astonishing is it that the more Christian somebody is all over the world, the more capitalistic they are. Jesus famously said it's harder for a wealthy man to get into heaven than a camel to get through the eye of a needle. Jesus was not unclear about his necessity for equality and feeding the poor. He could not have been clearer. Turn the other cheek, and yet the more Christian, the more military, the more, hey, let's bomb those people. What? How? That's what happens with all religions. Well, Yeshua of Nazareth was killed. Who killed him? Who killed him? Who killed God? The short story of Yeshua of Nazareth is that he came to the Jews and the Romans and he said, hey guys, Don't you realize that if we talk it out, we can get along, we can agree, we can be on the same team. We're humans on the same planet. We can talk, we can understand each other. We can work with each other. We work together. I can help you, you can help me. It's awesome. And the Jews and the Romans got together and said, yeah, we can work together. Just long enough to kill him, and they got back to fighting. Which Jews killed him, though? It's important to know. He was killed, it appears, or he was at least turned over to the Romans, allowed to be killed. For the record, according to Jewish law, if somebody is allowed to be killed by the authorities, by the kingdom, then you're allowed to turn them over. But it's not great for you to do so, but yeah, you're allowed to. Because the government, if there's no government, people will swallow each other alive. So it's important to some degree to support the government. Nonetheless, it is important for Jews to know, especially Orthodox Jews who dress like I do, that the Sanhedrin that killed him, first of all, Sanhedrin is a Greek term, but that's a separate point. The Sanhedrin, the high court that turned him over, they didn't kill him, but they didn't protect him, is the correct way to put it. They were mostly tzedaikim, they were mostly Sadducees. They were the wealthy people who you go to the old city, you walk through the Herodian quarter, a burned house. They were people who lived there in the old city of Jerusalem with huge mansions, while other people starved. These were not the greatest of people. These were the Sadducees. They had a mix. There were some Perushim. There were some Pharisees. It's funny, I need to explain the Pharisee part to Christians. Jesus often goes off on the Pharisees in the New Testament, but he's not going off on the Pharisees that Jews look up to. He's going off on people who are mimicking the Pharisees. He's not actually going off on those that we look up to. I can prove it in just a moment. But yes, Jews today, Orthodox Jews, and all Jews really, consider themselves to be spiritual descendants of the Pharisees, the Perushim. The two exceptions would be Samaritans and Karaites, who are small, tiny groups that, anyways. So they let him be killed by the Romans, and thereafter, as recorded in the book of Acts, I believe chapter 5, some of the followers of Jesus were out preaching in the name of this, so to speak, God who came back from the dead. Well, first of all, the whole God business. What an absolute mess. Almost everything that people have taken in translation to assume that Jesus is saying that he's God is not, we all consider ourselves sons of God, children of God. That's in the Old Testament all over the place. In the Jewish prayer, literally today, to this very day. Literally to this day. They considered him a tzaddik. They considered him a righteous man while he was alive. The same way as Hasidic groups of old would view their rabbi as a comprehension. How do you understand divine love? How do you understand divine wisdom? Well, it's pretty difficult because you can't see what this is philosophical, deep stuff. Spiritual, deep stuff. Well, you look at someone who you think appears to be pretty wise and pretty loving and pretty holy, and you're like, now I can get closer to understanding God. God is like that, but more so. That's it. If at times he said something bigger, first of all, he pretty much didn't. But if at times he said something, he meant like, listen, look around. Nobody else is saying what I'm saying. Nobody else is trying to save the Jewish people from the destruction that is coming. Nobody else is trying to redeem them in the way that I think is right. That's it. That's really it. And if someone will quote me verse, I will not even post it. If you write something intelligent that incorporates all of this and takes into account and considers all of this, and yet still wonders, I'll definitely post and deal with that. And you might be right even. I don't think that I don't get how a physical thing could be God. That doesn't even make sense. That's like saying that 2 + 2 = 5, like O'Brien in 1984. That's like nonsense already. That a physical thing could be the same as, what does it even mean? In any case, but yeah, if you want to convince me that Jesus said he was God in some kind of, I know the verses for the record, and therefore I will ignore and not even post anything that does not very humbly, and again, I need to be humble too. I'm not saying that it's, but consider everything here, and yet still think that, of course, I could be wrong, obviously, about anything I could be wrong. Goes without saying. But no, I don't think that in any way, shape, or form he thought that he was God, that he was the one who created the world, and it wouldn't have occurred to him. It doesn't make any sense in any way, shape, or form, philosophically or religiously or Jewishly. The Lord is one. It's the most essential statement of Jewish faith. What are you talking? It's complete it's a contradiction in terms. It's like asking if God can create a rock that it can't lift. Can God not be God? Can A not be A? Can white not be white? Can yellow not be? What does it even mean? Nothing. Nothing. Just sounds. That's all it is. So they were brought before the Sanhedrin, these disciples of Jesus. And the Sadducees wanted to kill them. Hey, these are idolaters, man! Actually, the Sadducees were the upper class people. They are idolaters. They're claiming that he's God, he came back alive. They weren't really claiming he was God, but they claim he came back alive and yada yada, whatever. So Rabban Gamliel, the great Rabbi Gamliel, the leader of the Jews at that time, Rabban Gamliel had the men taken out of the assembly so that he could talk privately with the Sanhedrin. Just to tell you who Rabban Gamliel was, the opening of the Talmud, the very first Mishnah in the Talmud, the first paragraph of the Talmud, the opening of it all, has 5, depending on your version of looking at it, but I counted these, so we'll go with this version. 5 lines about the very first opening statement from all of Jewish law. The Talmud is huge. It's thousands of pages. 5 lines of opinions from one person, Rabbi Eliezer, and then opinion from the Chachamim, the wise men, and usually that's where it ends. Rabbi Eliezer said this, but the majority of the sages said otherwise. Should be the end of that paragraph. Now, then it says Rabban Gamliel, who he himself wasn't even the head of a yeshiva. We're not talking about Rav Shimon Gamliel and other people who descended from him. We're not talking about Hillel. Rabbi Gamliel, or I believe he was Hillel's grandson. Rabbi Gamliel was the leader. He was above the whole business. Rabbi Gamliel says, nah, the opinion's this. And then right there in the first paragraph, it says, Maisa, let me tell you a story. It tells a story that his kids came back from a party, including Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, imaginable, his son, Rabbi Simeon, the son of Gamliel. And they asked about, should we say the Shema, which is a statement of faith, whatever. 13 lines. 5 lines that cover the opinion of the single great rabbi who has one opinion, and then the opinion of the majority of rabbis, and he gets 13. That's Rabbi Gamliel. Well, Rabbi Gamliel spoke to the Sanhedrin, and they said, hey, listen, it's probably nothing, these guys, going around preaching, yada, yada. These are the days when everyone's claiming the Messiah is here. Think about this dude. He names 2 different people. This dude showed up with 400 men, big ruckus. Eventually he annoyed the folk and everybody killed him. You know, because in those days, if you claim to be the Messiah, you tend to get on people's nerves. If you're, because it wasn't just, hey, I'm the Mashiach, you know, and you have to wait for someone to show up and stone you. You were going out there trying to get stuff done, and usually it involved weapons. And this other guy, Rabbi Gamliel mentions, he showed up and did nothing. So he says, this chevra, these guys over here, listen, if it's just their thoughts, their ideas, and they're wrong, it'll come to nothing. But if they're right, then you don't want to fight God. Rabbi Gamliel would agree, at this point, for the record, that they were wrong. The Jews did not accept them. It did not work out that way. It turned out terribly for the Jews. It accomplished a lot of good elsewhere in the world, and it opened the eyes of the world to the idea that there is a Torah, and to some great ideas in the New Testament as well. It's done some good stuff, some bad stuff, but that's what Rabbi Gamliel said. He said if it's their idea, if it's just something, you know it'll fail. That's how these things work. But if it's from God, you're fighting God. Be careful. Please don't hurt them. That's what he said. Don't kill them. I mean, they were flogged, of course, because, you know, what's the point of having a court if you can't hurt people a little bit? But the killing was the big thing. A little bit of a while later, we have a mention from Josephus, the great Jewish historian Josephus Flavius, Yosef ben Mattatio, Joseph the son of Mattatio. Josephus mentions how supposedly the brother of Jesus, we're not sure if it's his literal brother or someone referred to as his brother, probably his little brother, the brother of Jesus and some other people, brother of Yehoshua, Yehoshua of Nazareth, were taken before the Sanhedrin as well, who were mostly Sadducees, mostly Tzaddikim, mostly not pious Pharisees, or, well, the people mimicking the Pharisees who Yeshua mocked. I mean, of course they're not in the Sanhedrin. That goes without saying. The only reason the Sadducees were in the Sanhedrin is because they were wealthy. It's just as simple as that. They were brought before the Sanhedrin. It was mostly Pharisees, and he was killed. And, I'm sorry, it was mostly Sadducees, mostly not the Pharisees, mostly not the Prush, mostly not, they weren't wearing this, of course, but we who sometimes, ignore me, but people who generally wear this are Prushim. They followed these people. The Prushim of that day went to the Roman ruler of the region, and they said the high priest, Hanan ben Hanan, he had the brother of, we don't agree, because they were killed, by the way, for supposedly not following Jewish law well enough. And the people, Josephus says, the Perushim, who were the people who cared most about Jewish law, they went to the Roman leader and they said that these people who we don't agree with, these people who follow Yeshua who we don't agree with, they were murdered by this high priest and his Sanhedrin. And the high priest was removed from office. The Talmud mentions, no, not going to get sidetracked. There's no question that Yeshua attempted to alleviate much of the issues that the Jewish people faced in his day, and that he did not succeed. And he did not succeed at any point thereafter either, neither for the Jews nor for the world. By their fruits ye shall know them, he said. And you look at the world today, I don't know any Christian community, and I have investigated far and wide, I don't know any Christian community that even follows his precepts, turning the other cheek, all of his precepts. Even if you ignore all the Jewish stuff from the Bible, what they call the Old Testament, which Jesus clearly said don't get rid of, but it doesn't apply to Gentiles anyway, that, either convert or don't convert. But forgetting all the Old Testament stuff, just the stuff that he focused on, being in love with God and loving your fellow man completely like yourself, and if someone asks, give everything, give to the poor, he didn't succeed. It doesn't mean that he didn't help clarify some things. I think this video would offend and upset everybody, except for the wise, humble, discerning people who are curious and want to know. I hope some of them find this. I hope you are one of them. Be blessed, and may we actually, as a species, be, so to speak, redeemed by God, which I defined earlier as MS, truth, be redeemed by ultimate reality and the goodness, the love, the chesed that is existence. All of us as a people, because we can't do it really as individuals. I know this in my own life. You do it as an individual, society will still come at you. If you want to live great on your own, you got to help everyone else do it too. Got to fix society. Let's talk. Let's see if we can do it.